that I've learned, and Tony, I'd like to get your input on this too, is like the equivalent of what's happening right now. Um, it's like some people said, "Oh, it's like the internet movement, right?" Or it's like, no, it's the invention of the computer. And we had a guy here last week who's like one of the top AI guys out of Denver. He's like unbelievable. He goes, "No, no, no, no. This is equivalent to when electricity was discovered and all the innovations that came after the discovery of electricity." And so imagine that. Imagine how the people were responding when electricity was bringing brought on. How confusing it was. How scary it was.
That's fair. Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's like, remember, like there was no power. There was. I mean, it was like. So, like, what do you think of that? I mean, do you agree with that? Do you think it's equivalent to like the discovery or the revelation of electricity?
I think that's based on perspective, right? And good point, Greg. Like when electricity came around, there was fear, right? So even though that this technology is there, doesn't mean that people are going to adapt it. You know, we could be well into 10 years from now, and there's artificial intelligence that is doing, way more than it's doing today, and there's still going to be a subset of the population that's going to feel like, nope, not using it. I don't want it. Even me as an engineer, like as a technology, I love AI, but as a practitioner, I don't like it because I feel like, all right, you're trying to do what I do, but you can't do what I do that well. So it's, like I said, I think it's just perspective,
Yeah.
but it is, I think it is a major step, in what we're doing. I compare it to things like electricity, like, SpaceX using reusable rockets now, the invention of the airplane,
Yeah.
these
It's
things
equivalent to that level of innovation.
yeah.
That's
And-
changed the way we do life as a human race.
Right.
And I think the adoption of it is so high. Everybody's talking about it, right? And I think that's what's going to make it stick around. And so I think people are either going to overcome that fear, or they're going to be kind of back in the distance, still burning candles. Right?
Well, it's a fascinating thing because like once you understand that this isn't like a computer program, like this isn't like a Siri or a Google, or it's like this is like talking to a intellectual person, and it responds differently
and hallucinates, right?
and
It
hallucinates. So give you,
hallucinates.
it'll lie on accident. It'll make mistakes. The idea is like when you say please and thank you to it, it responds to that.
I think what's important to know about like that, right? AI, especially language models, it's patterns, right? It's
Yeah.
recognizing patterns and it's saying, you know what, I was trained on, you know, um, millions of different instances or examples, of sentences or question or Q and A's, right? And you have different categories of that, and then it's able to, oh, this is probably what what you want to
Yeah,
hear.
yeah. It's not
right?
emotional. It's
It's not.
intellectual. It's
No.
not emotional, but it intellectually can perceive when you're being rude and direct and nice and kind, from what
But
I understand.
I would argue that, and I know I'm going to say something that's controversial, but I'm going to argue that it can't to the extent that it's only doing what it's trained on, right? So if it's trained on, people from South Africa, it's going to give you that flavor of
Yeah.
responses,
It's
If
culture almost, right?
yeah.
It's like learning the individual, what the lens it's trained through.
Right. And that's the thing, right? Like these large language models are trained on like Wikipedia, for instance, right? Like you have that data set is being used, and there are things on Wikipedia that's not correct. Then you also have the fact that I think last time ChatGPT 4 at this point, September 20th to 21.
Correct.
So you have the data; it's stale, right? So it's not current. But I say all that to say it's only as the output is only as good as the input,
Yeah, of course.
and we have to make sure we recognize that the input is really the source. That's important. That's why you have companies now like Reddit blocking off their APIs. They don't want their input right without being paid for it. So now you have that limitation again. So even as good as these models will get at being able to recognize and produce inferences, it still comes down to what are human beings putting into
Yeah,
it.
it comes back to the human connection,
Yeah.
right? So what's the risks, consequences, and benefits that we see rising out of this new tech, right?
Well, I kind of think of AI usage really is like putting on that Iron Man suit, right? And we're just normal humans, but when we put on that tool, then we're heroes, right? You know. Now, one of the risks there is if we're not keeping up with what's going on and using those tools, learning those tools, or using tools that are using the tools, right? So, for example, we're developing APIs or software that's tying into the APIs for OpenAI, which is the back end of ChatGPT. And so we're kind of bringing the cookies down to the bottom shelf for folks of, hey, just type in here and you're going to get the response you want. We're going to basically interpret the middle there. But if you're not using those tools, then you are going to be kind of left behind. I think back to the Incredibles movie, right? When everybody's special, nobody is, right? Well, if you don't keep up, you're not going to be in that special category.
Yeah.
And particularly when it comes to business. There's so much strategy work that can be done, and to the point, there's a lot of fear around AI, and some of it's okay. Is AI going to take over the world?
It's like Terminator. Like that's like
Exactly.
everyone. Some
Yes.
people I talk to, they're like, "Oh, it's going to be Terminator." Like, what's
Yeah.
the real risk of that
Right.
actually happening?
So I had an interesting moment one time. So I was in the Navy, and we was on deployment. It was out on a carrier, and when a carrier is out on deployment, it's a whole battle group, right? So you have a carrier, you have destroyers, you have frigates, you even have EC2s flying around, and you also have at least an Ohio class sub that's under you somewhere. We don't know, right? And one Ohio class sub has enough firepower to destroy the entire planet. One of our subs has that, right? We have a lot of technology already in play that can destroy the world, right?
Yeah.
But there's governance around it.
Yeah.
There's regulation around it. There's oversight around it. And I think that now with machine learning or artificial intelligence being more prolific, right? It's more apparent. There's open source language models that anyone can use and train them on their own data and program them to do, their own thing, order pizza or, hack bank accounts, right? Now we need to put things in place because we are going to have those nefarious actors that are going to use these good things, just like nuclear energy, right? Nuclear power. They're going to use it to do bad things. So from that point, I don't see anything. I don't see much that's different in all the other technologies that we have brought, even from the invention of the gun, to nuclear bomb, to now to AI. We just need to, put things in place that we can mitigate the risks that are inherent.
For me, I always talk about technology and tools, like this. It's if I have, an assassin on one side and a surgeon on another, not pointing at you guys, but and I give the assassin a knife and I give the surgeon the same knife, what's the outcome that's going to happen? The assassin is going to take that same tool and they're going to use it for destruction, right? The surgeon is going to take that same tool and try to use it for healing. Right. And so that is like the reason why these conversations are so important is it's just like any other technology that we've experienced in humanity. And you think of some of those amazing quotes, right? It's like all that has to do for evil to win is for good people, good men to stand by and do nothing, right? And so you kind of walk that through, have the conversation moving forward. It's just like in negotiation. Whoever's more prepared wins, right? Whoever is more educated on the subject matter has the upper hand, has the angle. And so for our members and our people, entrepreneurs and leaders who have good core values, good hearts, and they have a giver's gain mindset, the idea is how can we use this tech in the right way that basically helps us exceed and excel our value-based companies and impacts that we're trying to create for people. not just goods and services, but solutions for real pain points. So what can't this tech do, right? What should it do? What shouldn't it do? Like where should we put the human in the middle? Like for me, we're using machine learning and automation to try to enhance the human connection, a higher quality connection for human beings, and we're automating the mundane in between. And so, but the goal is to get a faster, more qualified connection from human to human. That's how we want to use it as CRES. But so what do you guys think? Like, what can't this tech do? What should it do? Even what should it not do? Like the Jurassic Park question, right? It's like, you guys know what I mean by that? It's like, it's like we've had, you were so busy, trying to see if you can do it, you never asked yourself if you should do it. Who was the guy that said that? It was like the dude with the dark hair in Jurassic Park, but
Jeff Blue.
Yeah,
His
character said that, and you're like, how relevant is that statement now?
I think it is relevant, but as I said earlier, I don't think we're going to slow down to ask that question.
Yeah.
My pastor at my church actually started sending me articles, about AI and ethics around it and things like that. And we're actually producing a podcast about automation, and we have a transparency statement at the end of that saying that the content of the podcast and even my voice is produced with AI. And that was there specifically because we're like, oh, well, should we do this, right? And there's all kinds of questions about creative works, right? About that intellectual property.
Yep.
Right? Who really owns it, And I kind of see myself and others that are doing the kinds of things that I'm doing as, being AI and helping people with AI enablement and really prompt engineering, right? To accomplish a task. It's just like using a hammer, right? Rather than taking a rock and banging it up against a nail, So it's just a tool. And to your point, it's how is it wielded, So.
Well, what are things that so for me, I have a real example that I've been using this stuff. So we have this intellectual property, this concept that I've created called the 3 circles of purpose method, right? And I built it out. I physically built out the keynote and all this stuff. But then instead of hiring a ghostwriter, hiring out all these other who's, I thought, I'm going to take a stab at this. And so I exported it as a PDF. I uploaded it to GPT, and I said, can you please write me an outline with this PDF for a 12-page or 20-page ebook? Wrote the outline out, and I said, okay, I like the outline. Can you please ask me 3 questions about the first introduction to get more clarity in how I see this? And it did that, and we went back and forth, and then it wrote its thing. I said, can you please use my words? It did that. I said, can you merge them together? And I set up this prompting process, and within 5 hours, we'd written a book, basically.
Right.
And it was but my mind shifted as this is an assistant. I would hire a ghostwriter, we'd go do a retreat or something. That's how authors write books. And that ghostwriter, you would be, speaking into it, you'd be outlining it, and they would basically be taking your words that you're creating and your concepts, and then just making them a little bit prettier, more grammatically correct. I mean, that's how I use it even this week. I mean, I feel like I would own that intellectual property, just like the ghostwriter wouldn't own it. Right. I would own it as the guy who thought of it and spoke it, and they would help me write it. What do you guys think?
So one of the questions, right, is, and some of the fear that's out there is it's going to take away my job, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, I heard that with Tony a minute ago, right? It's trying to write software, and I'm using it to do the same thing, right? But did you take a job away from that ghostwriter?
Yeah. I would have paid somebody to do that.
So it was interesting when in New York City, when they started building high-rise buildings, there was a union for diggers that were fighting against high-rises because the jobs of the diggers, because they were going to go down rather than up, were at risk. Those jobs for diggers went away, but they transitioned to be construction workers working on those high-rises.
Because it adapts.
Exactly.
Yeah. Society adapts.
Always. And so I think it's looking at those opportunities and trying to look where things are going. And with an abundance mindset, you know,
of course.
we're not taking it away. There's so much opportunity out there that, I mean, that's, as entrepreneurs, that's probably the biggest problem that we have, right? Too many opportunities that we get distracted and not focused on one thing.
Yeah, I mean, the fear is that how much more is critical thought going to be destroyed, right? I mean, right now, and how much greater is the gap going to be created within society? Because you have like people that will use the current technology before AI machine learning really started coming along, and the power of like social media and the power of the internet and connection, and they did that and they made millions and millions of dollars, right? While other people watch videos of cats.
Yes.
Like, let's be honest,
Yes,
right?
yes.
And so it's like, how can we come back down to educating the human condition of driving value with purpose, value with passion, and to me, it always comes down to the human condition. It always comes down to like what we're trying and accomplishing even here, but between these four walls. How do we produce synergy connections where a human being comes together and there's this shared energy that comes through with like minds and like hearts, and then it goes from 1 + 1 = 2 to a synergized growth of 1 + 1 = 100. In my opinion, I don't think this new tech will ever be able to mimic and create the energy between two human beings coming together. But I do think there's a huge opportunity if harnessed and educated correctly to exponentially increase the value of life. That doctors could use this as an assistant who's brilliant for them to probe questions about what they're thinking, and this thinking in seconds. I think with the right human intellect paired with it, I think it has a chance of curing diseases like cancer and those type of things. I mean, but I don't think you take away the question that everyone needs to ask is, where's the human in between, right?
Right. Yeah.
What do you think, Tony?
I think, you know, to me, it's no different than, you know, when like the tractor was invented, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like there were farmers, you know, that were doing a lot of, you know, labor by hand, and then the tractor came along, and then maybe, you know, I favor more the term displace than losing a job, right?
Yeah.
So, like, even like computers, right? Like the first computer that's a job description, right? There were people that you know, back in the early 1900s, like they started, they were computers that they were compute information. Mm-hmm. And then now that you have actual computers, then now you have people using the computers to compute the information, right? You're taking the time to use AI to upload a PDF to do that, right? And you said in 5 hours you did that, but that was 5 hours of your time. What if you let the ghostwriter do that for you? Send him him or her the PDF.
You could do that. The thing is, it would have been the same amount of energy because I had to spend the 5 hours anyways because I was creating it. It was my property that I was developing and creating and writing. Right. And so I would have had to do. So it would have made it a moot subject to send that to the ghostwriter, have the ghostwriter. Then now when we go to write the full book, when I put all these things together, right, maybe that makes more sense because then you're giving them a full draft. But yeah, I get what you're saying.
That's
like,
my point.
Like,
yeah.
Where does the ghostwriter come in? Where does the editor come in? Where does the human connection come in? Just with writing books.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think. It's
sorry. Just as we're talking.
Yeah, it's just we're always going to, like you said, Greg. We're going to adapt. Right? We're humans. That's what we do. We make mistakes and we adapt. And in the age of AI, we're gonna adapt this thing, you know, to our lives. But it's also gonna allow us to be, you know, in many areas, be more performant in what we do. So like, I don't want to use it to necessarily to write code because I feel like, you know, I can write the code. But then an aha moment for me was, one of the things that I do as an engineer is review code. Yeah. So if I'm paying, you know, ChatGPT $20 a month, and I can just say, hey, write the code so I can do this, and this, and then I don't have to write all that boilerplate. Let's say it takes me normally 10 minutes to write, and I can write it in 2 seconds. Yeah. Now I have to just review it and make sure it does what I want it to do, which I should. Yep. Right. Yeah. And now I'm able to move faster. I'm able to ship features faster. Everyone knows the story now of the attorney, right, who got disbarred. Oh, yeah. Right, because he didn't review. Yeah. And this AI technology basically
made up cases that never existed.
My brother went to law school with him.
Did he? Oh man, that poor guy. He was and I guess like the full story was like there was like a younger attorney that did it for him, and the younger attorney didn't review it, and the senior guy didn't review it because he paid the younger attorney to do it, and he just trusted it. And you go, human in the middle, guys.
But isn't that the same thing that you do with paralegals?
Yes.
Right? It doesn't matter if it was ChatGPT or paralegal. You still need to
You're the
review
attorney.
it.
You need to review it. Yeah, that's the whole. So that's the point. Is like this technology, and I want to get into automation because I love automation. I'm a big automation guy. We use automation here, and I would say it probably does the work of 15 or 20 people for us. Administratively, communication. But it still needs our leadership, and that's the best way to look at it. It's increasing efficiencies, but also increasing reliability because it always shows up. So the building turns itself on, turns itself off. It's like it takes people out, it puts people on, it does all these different things. So we're like, I'm a mad scientist trying to find more and more ways to systematize and automate the mundane experience of just so that we can focus. And it's the that's always important. It's the purpose of it.
Yes.
And so thank you. So then we hit the that position of like, I want to do this so that we can have higher level connections, deeper level connections, right?
Yeah,
and you go, it's like if I cannot have to focus on, telling the AC guy that the ACs are broken, and the thermostat can just send an email, that's next level, right?
Yes.
Because it just goes. So it's understanding, like even what I'm talking about in this concept that we're going to release. It's like your 1129. It's the 5% of who you are. 80% of everything that comes your way, somebody else can do. Right? 15% that comes your way, somebody with a proper training and proper pay can do, but 5% from the moment you're born to the moment you die. No one will ever be able to do that. So the question is, how much of this 80% stuff can now be replaced by this technology? And in the real heartbeat of this, how do we responsibly integrate this software into our daily life? What are some of the most creative things you're seeing of integration that we can apply, and that those that are listening can really be inspired and dig deeper in this?
Yeah, for me, I kind of focus on business, right? What can we do better, faster, cheaper? Right?
Yeah.
Okay. And in years past, you pick two maybe, right? But you can't get all three. And really, with AI, you're able to start getting all three at the same time.
Mind-boggling.
It is.
Say that again. It's bigger.
Faster, better, cheaper.
Faster, better, cheaper.
Right. Yeah. And so for me, I'm focused on a lot of strategy things. Mm-hmm. So as I'm going through strategic planning for the new year, I'm actually engineering prompts to use with ChatGPT with the OpenAI API to be able to look at, hey, give me a pestle analysis to see where my risks are out there in the marketplace. Let me do a SWOT analysis on our company. Let me look at a quarterly goal and have ChatGPT break down all the different steps of that goal. I want the 64 minor steps to that goal to be identified, so we can go start checking those boxes, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's strategy. It's a super assistant.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. I mean,
What's the first step of doing that for someone who's like, I have no clue what he just said?
Call me. First step really. First step really is along the lines of what Tony talked about, right? Yeah. And that is start using ChatGPT. Don't stick with the free thing, right? Pay the 20 lousy bucks for the enhanced to get to the ChatGPT 4. Mm-hmm. That gets you access to the plugins, which gives you a whole world of access to be able to do different things.
Yeah.
So start using ChatGPT as you do Google today. Mm-hmm. If I want to look something up in Google, I stop myself and say, oh, okay. So I'm going to go to ChatGPT and say, how can I do this thing? Or I ask the question of, how can you help me do this thing?
Yeah, it's in the phrasing. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a really good tangible thing. Like if you're just trying to get in, and because I don't know how my iPhone works. I know that there's all sorts of precious metals in here. I know there's programming. I know it's made of glass and all these different things. I just know that it works, and it's a tool that I use. And I remember when phones didn't have touchscreen.
Yeah.
Right? I remember that. I'm sure we all do. And it's just like that this has a computing power that's just in my pocket is crazy of what I can do with it. And I'm only using probably 10% of the power this thing really has. I mean, that's okay. So, I think that comes down into this habitual process of like, how do you learn something new, right? And it comes down to the compounding effect. Make it easy, make it simple. Replace what you're already doing with something else. So I love that. That's a really, really, really good thing that I'll probably start doing even more. Anytime I think, oh, I'm going to Google this question, I'm actually going to go to AI and do that. And because you're right, it has all the information, but then will also think for me and save me those 3 or 4 extra steps of having to think for it. What do you think, Tony?
I like that. I think that's a good approach. I would keep in mind that, the data that you do find in ChatGPT is out of date. It's not
Was
in real
this
time.
new one, PI, that just came out? That's like, have you heard of that one?
No, I have not heard
Yeah,
of
well,
PI.
so PI is this new GPT that came out, not just chat, but that it's with all current data. So you can ask it about current data today,
Right.
and it's called PI.
Yeah.
I haven't used it, but we can use it right now, actually. Like, what's the current event that we want to talk to this thing about?
What's the weather look like in Tampa today?
Yeah, that's a good one. Let's see if this is real. I was told this can do. What's the weather like in Tampa today? Tampa is looking pretty nice today. The current temperature is 84 degrees Fahrenheit with mostly sunny skies. Wow, it did it. Wind speed is 15, real time.
Very good.
All right, so that's PI. Now, that's the crazy thing, is that we are in this innovation movement that is a new, these guys, I'm not even the subject guy on this. And I was like, there's this new GPT that's out that can actually do real-time data. But I don't know if it's real or not.
See, that's a good point. So the weather right now actually is 82 degrees. It's projected to be 84 at 1 p.m.
Uh-huh.
So
It's not exactly right. It's off by an hour.
no. But what I'm
Yeah.
not nitpicking it. I'm
Yeah.
thinking like, okay, where did it get that information from? Where did it get 84 from? Cause that's really important, right?
Yeah, of course.
Like, where's my phone getting 82 from? Because weather comes in for APIs. Like, there's actually sensors out there. So it's just thinking about like, models like what access does it have to actual real world, IoT devices that it could bring in that real time data. But so that's when I see 84 versus 82. That becomes like really interesting to me to see,
So I just asked another question. What should I do today with my 7-year-old?
Oh boy.
And it gave me, it's like, you literally, it's Google on steroids. But, so that's PI. I actually have never used it till just now. I downloaded it like 2 days ago. And I think this might actually replace GPT. I'm gonna do a shotgun against the two. But that's the craziest thing about a guy like me who's ultra creative, ultra like visionary. This is like a kid in a candy store. Like these guys, you guys like you are creating stuff every day at such a rapid speed that no one can keep up. I mean, we had this AI guy here like last week, and my brother showed him 2 things that were out that he didn't know about, and he's like, and that's what he was talking about. Is like the playing ground is equal right now. It is equal because of the speed that this stuff's coming out, and so anyone who's listening today, it is not too late. You're actually an early adopter into this technology.
For sure.
But for me, it's like, how does someone? And I think we should shift over to like an early Q&A on this, because I think this is a really hot subject. That I think, how can somebody integrate within their daily practice, say automation? I mean, I know we use CRMs. We're big Go High Level fans on our stuff. A lot of people are switching over to that. You use a different type of CRM. But automation is changing the game too. Let's talk about that, and how does AI and automation work together? So let's take like 5 minutes to discuss like the power of automation and really what is automation versus AI.
Right.
Well, one of the first rules of AI is don't use AI, right? Or not AI, machine learning, right? Because it's like, do you have that problem, right? Automation, in my experience, is usually a number of different levers, right, and rules, right, around, okay, if this happened, then do that, and if that isn't the case, then do that, right? So it's almost like you have this state machine or step functions, right, to kind of go through this decision path. That's not machine learning, right? That is literally hard-coded instructions on this is
It's like
what.
robots,
Yeah.
basically, doing things for you.
I wouldn't say robots because robots are controlled by some type of processing unit, whether it's direct input from humans. So even if a remote control car, you're giving
That's
it
true.
direct inputs, or if you do have AI like neural networks are being placed into robots, right? And the neural network provides the input to the servers. To the servos to dictate what the robot does or how it responds. But in a sense of automation, starting from the beginning, right? It's what tools are out there that you can connect and integrate so that you can have levers and triggers, right? Activate based on what the initial input is and what the step inputs is within that graph. Now, if you want to get creative and say that if this is happening, okay, create this contract, and here's the customer's information, this, that, and the third, then appending that to the automation, right? And now you can trigger that, and that contract is created on a fly per house or per type of customer or per price or whatever the case is, right? And also fine tuning your model, right, based on your data. So that it fits your specific use case, and of course, making sure legal team reviews it before it's. But that's how I see it, where it's an addition to what we have right now in a sense of automation. We can then supercharge that using things like machine learning.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of automation around for a long time, and a lot of that automation was pretty manual, right? And a few years back, there were products like Blue Prism, and I'm trying to think of some of the other names of them, but they had very pricey license fees associated with that. So to even get in the game, companies would be spending at least 10 grand, a year on licensing to do that. Robotic process automation is different than robotics, right, with those servos and everything doing those actions. But robotic process automation is actually that process of identifying those steps and taking those decision trees to take those different actions. You certainly can tie in AI to do different things, for sure. But Microsoft has actually brought some of that automation down to the bottom shelf where we can all partake of it, right? A lot of the licensing the costs have gone out the window because it's a part of Microsoft 365 with those Power Apps. And so we're doing things like one of our clients manages funds for different municipalities. And so we're having and those municipalities have all these kinds of different checking accounts and things like that, and different funds, bond funds, etc. And so what we're helping them with Microsoft Power Automate is to consume those documents, whether they be PDFs or even images, scanned images, and basically lifting those things, the data off of those documents, and processing those into a database on an automated basis. So all they have to do in their particular case is drag these documents into a folder. The Power Automate recognizes that it's in that SharePoint folder. It goes and does the work and stuffs just things directly into the database in a format that we've trained it through machine learning to be able to recognize.
Now, how do you train? Like, what is exactly like? What do you use for machine learning? Like, I hear that term a lot.
Yeah.
Like, what is that truly? Like, how do you tie that with automation?
So in Microsoft's world, you've got to provide it several samples of the type of document that you want. So we drag several Bank of America statements into the folder and say, okay, this is where you're going to find the opening balance. This is how you're going to find the closing balance.
To slow down, so machine learning is giving a software information that you want it to learn.
Correct.
I'm taking notes too because I'm trying to learn as much, and this is actually really good stuff, guys. So you're prompting it, you're giving it information to learn.
Correct. And so a lot of the concepts in machine learning is really how big is that sample size?
Okay.
Because the more samples you've got, the more accurate it can be. It's just like when we were going through pandemic, you're looking at all these different things on stats for different COVID cases and things like that. The more data you've got, rather than just a small sample
How can a doctor
size.
use this?
Oh, I mean, great question. I'm not a doctor.
But I'm saying, like, how, like,
Yeah. So, I mean, lots of different ways I would think from an automation standpoint.
Yeah.
You know, it could be anything you can dream up, you know. And I guess let me define that for just a second. The way I define robotic process automation, if you're used to Excel and you have the ability to create a macro, okay, and you say, okay, well, have it go to this cell and then copy this cell to that cell and do whatever, right, a little macro. That robotic process automation in these different programs, and particularly Microsoft Power Automate, is the same process, but you can do that across any application. So you can work with a legacy system, you can work with the newest system, you can work with
Another
whatever,
question.
and tie it all together.
how can a cabinet company use this?
How can a cabinet company use
I'm looking around, looking at industries in the room. I'm asking based off of a different
Sure.
industries.
I mean, you can use process for cabinet maker. If you're stocking products, you can do all kinds of inventory control stuff.
Okay.
To be able to track that inventory as an example. So you control that stock management as an example, and automate process ordering. You know, when our quantities drop below a certain level, then automatically send an email.
Yeah.
You know, and so on. You know, a lot of these things honestly have been around a long time. It's just we're putting labels on them now,
Yeah.
right? I mean, AI has existed
Since the 50s.
yeah, and people
Yeah.
have been using it without knowing it, right? When you're working with spam filters in your email, right? You're using AI and ultimately machine learning over lots and lots of samples to train it what spam looks like. So it can go into a certain folder and you can ignore it, right?
Yeah.
Same kind of thing with process automation, right? So
Absolutely. Tony, what do you think?
One thing, I was thinking as you were speaking, Greg, like, or the question you asked, right? How can doctors use this, right? That's one of the issues with that is HIPAA.
Yeah, so secure. How do we securely use
Not
this?
even secure it, right? Like, how to use, because now you have to train this model on a number of patients' data for it to be effective.
Yeah.
Do you have permission for all those patients?
So you have to get permission from the patient to use the technology. Is it something?
Not so much the technology, but the information, right?
Yeah.
Your medical information is your medical information.
Yeah, you own it. It's yours.
Right?
Yeah.
So if I'm training I have a medical practice and I'm training my models on your data, okay.
Your fiance is a pediatrician.
Yeah.
And one of my doctors is here right now, so that's why I brought this up. It's like, because this is really fun. Like, so.
Right. So you have that situation, right? And even if you have the permission, right? Now, and this was, we had this discussion with Legal a couple of days ago, was like in California, you have this right to forget, right? So if a customer says, hey, I want you to just delete all my information, all right, are you going to remove that training data
How do they
now?
do? Yeah.
You know
Yeah,
what
we
I'm
were having
saying?
this talk. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's
Complex.
it's complex in the sense of what we can do with the current regulations and what we should do with the coming regulations, and just security and privacy. Like, there's just so many things to consider long before you get to the point of, okay, now let's use this cool thing in this particular way. My fiance, one of the things that she does every single night for like an hour is write notes. And I'm like itching. I'm like, you could do this. And it's like, nope, can't. Because she either has to log in on a VPN and then use Citrix to log in to the system, just so that they maintain, their HIPAA compliance, or her being able to, do those things. So, you just have to just take those things into consideration.
So what would be the next step to allow doctors to do that? Because I see that as like one of the most vital things. If we could help our physicians and our doctors, our nurses, to get better information, to get better communication. I mean, even right now, like my father is, overcoming cancer, but I personally was an advocate for him, and I caught that the communication broke down between the doctor, the specialist, to the hospital's pharmacy, to the guy implementing it. The doctor changed information. This is a true story. And I was sitting there, and I took rigorous notes, interviewing the doctor, like most people don't. almost putting him in his place when he tried to move too quickly. When we didn't understand, it's like these different things. Like people don't have that type of rigorous behavior usually, or like leadership with doctors, and so specifically like specialists. And I'm glad I did because I was taking notes. I'm a pretty avid note taker, and so I was there. And then I went to his first treatment, and he was there, and there was a position of there was 3 items, so I had a number, and I was measuring, and he had 3 vials on the stuff. And I said, "What about this, this, and this?" And he was like, "No, what are you talking about?" And I said, "Well, there was a breakdown of communication." And I even mentioned like this type of stuff. I said, "Well, this seems simple to automate this to get this breach of information." You know what they forgot was his chemo. Of everything, it could have gone for months without them. So they had all these different things, and the poor guy that was administering it was flustered. It took like an hour and a half, and then it took like 3 days to actually get all of his proper medications put in because of breakdown communication. So you see this breakdown within like our health industry, and then obviously we have HIPAA and all these different things. Like what is like a tuning machine that we can do with this tech? Because you see that and you're like, man, lives are like can be really bettered and supported, but at the same time, how do we do this to where it's not abused through our HIPAA and privacy?
And that really is the challenge, right? I mean, when you give up security and you have that transparency of data, you have larger sample sizes.
You have
right?
a freedom. Well, yeah.
But HIPAA, part of the things that Tony was talking about is you have to document from a HIPAA compliance perspective every access of that information. So every person is recorded when they went and looked at a patient's piece of information, right? So now one way to get around that from a medical perspective might be just to provide that that data
like
anonymously, right? Anonymously,
okay.
right? So it's not specific to a patient, right? Because then you can provide that data from a sample perspective that would be consumed by machine learning, but not being
tied to a human name and identity.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
So,
that makes sense.
So when you remove data, you don't necessarily have to remove that because it's not tied to a direct patient.
Well, that was part of the argument, and I don't. I'm not. A lawyer.
Yeah, I'm not either.
I was on the side of, well, if we remove the name, then we could keep everything else. And it was like, no, that was their data. That is their data. They
still own it.
That.
Yeah,
so,
even though their name's on it, they have to consent.
Yeah.
Morgan's shaking her head. She's like, yeah, this is a complex matter.
It is.
Yeah, this is something unique. Let's open this up to some conversation, some Q&A, and we'll just kind of jump on there a little early. But we got the microphone. It's going to come around. And how this works is you just kind of raise your hand. You have a question. And now we interact with you guys as a full conversation on the subject. So this could be anything. How can you have some pretty solid guys who know how to do some stuff. They might be able to give you some real good tools for your company, or your life, or whatever you want. You're going to want to turn that microphone down a little bit, I think. No, you go ahead and use it. Yeah.
Okay.
Never
my
mind.
name is Sarah. So one of my questions is, where do we go to learn what it can do and how to do it? Because I feel like, there's so many tools out there, and I mean, you can go broke trying to, piece it all together. But for example, like if you have, this specific problem. So for example, one of mine is, we have a company that sends out an email based on a test a student takes, and we want to put the student's name and data and good job and a little note and all that kind of stuff. If you're trying to do something specific, what are some of the ways that you can find out how you can do it? Like intellectually, I know it can be done, but the how part.
Sure. So my recommendation, if you're talking about the use of AI specifically, the best expert at AI is the AI itself. So ask it, hey, I want to do this thing. How can you help me do that? Ask it, tell me 10 questions that will help you to clarify my question in regards to this issue so that I can get better data from you.
Tony, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, just like what Greg said, right? There's a whole discipline around prompt engineering, which is knowing how to communicate with the AI. Even sometimes you'd ask the AI something. You ChatGPT, I hate calling it the AI. ChatGPT, you would ask it something, and the response would give you. It's just like if it's a riddle or it's there's something more complex when it comes to like reasoning, for instance. It's not going to give you an accurate answer, right? and it comes down to you now as the user being able to make the corrections or the adjustments to what you're prompting to get back something tangible. And with that, even like Greg said, pay the $20 a month, right? Learn to use it. And I like it a lot more from the creation side, like getting ideas about, okay, you know, give me 5 ways that I can, do this particular thing, or, give me some ideas. Like we were trying to figure out a name for a company. I mean, it came thousands of names I got back from ChatGPT just trying to come up with different things. So, there's that creative side of it. But again, yeah, just learn to use it, learn how to prompt and adjust, and, do a lot of execution on the things that you get from it, like experimentation and, understanding what you're getting back, measure it, and then till you get to a point where you have something solid.
Yeah, so the answer to learn AI is to like just ask it. That's the craziest thing about it. Just go to it and it'll tell you about itself if you ask it the right question. And it's like, but some of the other stuff you're talking about is similar to like what we do within like our CRM, and a solid CRM could help you. And like Brian knows a lot about this too. I mean, with his new company, and like we have like automated workflows, and in the workflow you can program it to respond to specific tags, and you can what's it called when you add like a specific name or date? It's called a
Trigger, maybe?
No. What's the word? Like it's we had to update them all the time. It's a
your custom values?
custom values. So what you're talking about is like a custom values feature of a specific child and their name, their age, what they've done. You can actually put, and like at least in our CRM that we use, you can use our exact CRM for that. You put their name and what they're doing, and on that note or that text or email you're trying to send them, it can put their name in. It can put, you did a great job. It could put their grade in. You can actually have it, but it still needs the human in the middle. Yeah. It still needs you. But once you do it, it just can keep doing it.
And that's a valid point. You don't really necessarily need AI for what your use case was.
For that business, it's because it's like there's 40 different like tests that they can potentially take. So with that, like
it's triggers. You would use like a trigger position on it and tags and different things like that. But now my question to that is, how could I use AI?
Yes.
To right, like so how? I mean, because that sometimes is we forget, like the lack of human discipline or just getting busy. Like we forgot this last month to update our information. So none of the weekly texts went out because we set blocks. And so how can we use AI in that case? Be like, oh man, can this learn to ask us a question when the next thing is, and then automate and fill in all those things by itself?
Certainly can, but again, kind of to your point, right? Here was a question, and you answered it because you had the information.
Yeah.
It continues to be that you can ask that question to ChatGPT or any of the AI tools out there.
It's
right?
interesting.
What are the best tools to accomplish this task, right? Even if it's not directly using AI in doing the task itself, it's learning what are the tools out there that I can use to do this task. We do that all the time.
Got it.
Yeah, just like the right tool for the right tool for the right job.
Yeah, it's a hammer.
Like literally, if you look at some manifestos out there on AI, especially with Google, right? Like that's like one of the first things to talk about. Like, do you even need AI? Do you even need machine learning for your problem? You may not need it. If you're trying to, put a nail in a piece of wood, you probably don't want to use a jackhammer.
Yeah.
So that's really the first question. Like, do you need it? In your
need.
Solution. But I think at the very least, with these consumer tools like ChatGPT, you can use that, like you said, Greg. Ask, well, what is the best tools I can use for this particular thing, and based on what it's trained on, it'll be able to give you some type of insight into that.
What are some other questions? Those are great questions.
Hi, my name is Morgan. I'm a clinician. I'm a researcher, so I like hard numbers, hard facts. I hear a lot of ideas that's best to be put through something like AI, whereas machine learning is maybe something different, where you're putting in specifics and hard stops and levers and things like that. As a clinician, with things like HIPAA and these laws in place, And as a clinician who likes to have a relationship with my patients and is creative in coming up with ideas on how to best treat them based off maybe not their vitals or anything, but what they've told me.
Right.
Where is some of that in between, I guess, of the creative of AI or my relationship with the patient and something like a machine learning of their vitals went off and, you know, these are some recommendations of medications and whatnot. Where's I guess, the middle ground or the marrying of the two? Does that make sense?
I love that question.
It's a great question.
Yeah. I think it's you, right? I mean, we're talking about that human element, really. And I think you can certainly, you know, use some of these tools to deepen your own understanding of what might be, you know, it can think faster potentially than you to some degree, right? And if there's a possibility of, you know, 5 different diagnoses and you may think of, you know, the top 2 immediately, but it's those kind of edge cases that may be helpful.
What is a
you know?
tangible vehicle that she can drive? Like, because I do think that and you know, I mean, they're my doctors. They're the best I've ever met from their bedside. You know, Dr. Tracy's house. Everyone should go there. In my opinion, they're awesome, very personable. That's how medicine should be practiced, right? And that's my advertisement for them, like as a consumer and a patient. But it's, you know, I want a tangible way that she, who's a talented clinician and very personable and knows the patient and wants to help them the best way they can, is getting data that sometimes testing can't get. She's getting personal input from clients. What is a tool that she can use in real time to best serve that patient?
Like Greg said, it's you, right? And I'm saying that in a sense of understanding what you can take, like with HIPAA, right? What information you can use of that patient in another tool, right? To then decide and say, and then get some kind of feedback from that tool and say that, okay, so hard concrete example is you're able to see the data, right, from this patient's, like their blood pressure, this, whatnot, right? And you can easily ask ChatGPT, for instance, not that you should, but you can ask ChatGPT and say, you know, a patient with these particular symptoms, you know, what is that diagnosis, right? Or whatever it is you're trying to figure out. So there's that bridge, right? You're not inputting like that personal patient information into a model that you don't have, you know, control of. What I do see, you know, possibly, you know, happening in the future where we're in this place where we have these open, you know, these open source models that are out there, and we've always had a number of data sets, right? COVID data sets, we have HIV data sets, cancer data, probably cancer is the most. We have so many data sets with that, you know, and training those models on those particular data sets, and you're going to have, you know, like Harvard Med, you know, is going to be doing this. You're going to have Stanford is going to be doing this. And then someone is going to lead the forefront of getting approved to be able to have better interaction with patient data and using these models, right? So even if you have you're running the model on servers, like you can't just put medical data on, you know, any regular server. It has to be a HIPAA certified server, stuff like that. So once those things are established and the medical community can approve and regulate the operation or the implementation of those things, I think that's when we more get to a point where we can use things like large language models or machine learning or even neural networks and being able to, you know, input that patient data and answer those questions.
I mean, on a tangible play more, what I would say on this is I don't think because of the kind of regulations and like rightfully so, some of the red tape that we have to have in place legally, I don't know if machine learning can quite really be used in that case yet, because I don't know if there's a secure, like a closed source where it's that's the only way I could say is if it could like stay in it's where it's not going out, it's staying in house and then deleting rapidly fast, because the end game is trying to get a solution, right? A proper is that the right, like the motive behind the question?
Yeah, so there is. So like AWS, for instance, right? There is Department of Defense. So there's services where you can if you're a DoD contractor and you're building software for the DoD, like you would have to run it on those
So it
servers.
exists.
Yeah, they do exist. Yeah.
It just hasn't been released yet to.
Right, we're
regulate.
talking about we're talking about machine learning, AI, right? What it runs on, the hardware, the actual
Yeah.
physical devices, that's something different. So what I'm saying is that there already is the infrastructure that allows whatever you want to run, whether it's a website or if it's a machine learning model,
Got it.
in an environment that is
Fully
approved
secure, yeah.
for
Yes.
for that particular use case.
Well, that's encouraging. So everything already exists. We've just got to figure out how to use it the right way. I would say like just a real tangible thing within like just having and view this technology, Morgan, as you have like the most brilliant assistant and like just friend next to you in your pocket while you're sitting in your patient's room, and ask this brilliant assistant, hey, can you give me 3 questions? Ask me 3 questions. Here's the context of what's going on with this patient. Ask me 3 questions to clarify this. This is the outcome I'm trying to get. And then that prompting is so crucial, asking it to ask you for clarity, because the more detailed and contextual information that you give this, the more critical thinking and creative solutions it'll generate for you. And then you can literally take that and say, I need you to do this with me. Can you merge it this way? Can you do this? And you can form a really, really fun plan of action for somebody, and then even tie it and give somebody, using technology, a visual that you can give the patient. Hey, here is a nutritional roadmap for you to follow. This is something, and it could be literally designed one-on-one for that specific, and that actually exists. It's just, but again, it comes down to your expertise of what you're visually seeing, of what they're saying and what they're not saying, right? To try to get the results and solutions that you know that they need in their life. And I don't know if does that help or not, or no?
And I've got one other piece to that too. You know, your highest and best use as a clinician really is your intuition and your experiences in being able to diagnose something, but it's also that bedside manner, and that's something that can't be replaced with AI.
Period. It cannot be.
It cannot.
Yeah.
But if you want to do your best job, that is where you need to be focused, is on those things, and let automation and AI do everything else, right? So developing a custom plan, when you may spend a little bit of time to figure out what that looks like on a generic basis, and let AI potentially tweak it, specific to additional information that you give it. Might be one piece of information.
What do you think, Morgan? Was that more confusing or was it clear? Was it good? Any follow-up?
I did have a question.
Yeah.
I guess of clarity. So as far as going in as a clinician, and I want to see data, I want to see, okay, losartan versus irbesartan. Irbesartan's newer. My patient has these little things that I want to make sure we're not interacting with, because all of our EHRs already have checking interactions. They already have, this is major, can't take this med with this med, don't prescribe these together, got it, already got that. But it's the nuances that don't necessarily come up, that are more in conversation with your patient, that you feel, like you said, the intuition, the bedside manner. I know this isn't right for my patient based off my experience. But if I want to ask that type of question, I guess I want to know, am I going to be able to get that research? Am I going to be able to get the best? Like he was saying, it's a little behind. Whatever came out yesterday from the NIH, am I going to be able to get that type of info right there and then with my patient? Is that possible?
Yes. Okay. So there's this beautiful thing with, in machine learning called fine tuning, right? So let's say you have a model that, that's been, trained on, various different medical data sets, right? But you specialize in a particular area, whatever. And you have your research, right? Different dissertations, different documentation on different, disease or whatever the case is, right? You can then fine tune that model to what you have, right? And then when you ask questions now to this model, it's going to be able to use that data to produce inferences on, based on what it has been trained on. So-
what would be a product you could recommend that she could look into or something like that? Is there anything out there that is easily? I got you. I know how to ask this type of question, right? Like, where does this exist that I can go and either license it or download it right now?
Yeah, and I'll kind of push it back, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not in the medical field. I know a lot of acronyms because I'm in software development, but I don't know all of yours, right?
I think
So-
about EHR for a second.
I still don't know what that is. What?
But
What was it?
again, use something like.
Oh, got it. Okay.
But you can use like ChatGPT to recommend different sources of data that might be available and how that might be able to be used. Now, some of the machine learning and things like that Tony talked about at AWS, I mean, that's not on the bottom shelf yet, right?
AWS is what it's called, though?
Well, AWS is Amazon Web Services.
Okay,
right?
got it.
So, and land of acronyms. So
Amazon Web. I'm learning that.
yeah, but there's lots of different things there, from hosting and all sorts of different ways that you can interact with AWS.
I'm learning. You see what he just did? He said, "Go and ask but it's a question
Yeah.
because I had the same questions. All right, I'm a nuts and bolts type of person. Like I get it. Now let's drive where is the vehicle? So AWS is Amazon Web Services. It's very expensive, right?
Some pieces are not. I mean,
Yeah.
you can, some of the hosting can be very inexpensive. You can rent machines basically
Yeah.
and everything
Well-
else. But there are those different machine learning things that they have on there, and they even have on Amazon Web Services the ability to hire folks to create samples and things like that.
I personally
So, I mean, it's
love
a crazy world.
the questions that you're
Yeah.
asking, the way you're thinking about this, innovatively, because it's like this is how one of the most magnificent ways of this technology will change the world is by how you're asking the questions right now. And the cool thing is that you may be one of the only, you're for sure a small percentage of the world's population that's asking that question right now, which is really cool. You're a front runner. And so the also kind of moment is that you have to also go find the answer to it. But what I find the encouragement as an innovator, as an implementer of new thoughts, is that when these guys say it exists, that means that it exists, and I can go find it, and but then I have to test it. There's the MVP, and I would say with these type of things, so what I'm learning is that you just have to hit a minimum viable product or a use of how this is going to run, and you don't want to try to get this thing perfected out the gate before using it. You want to use it at 1% increments, building it into your daily use in life, because then it hits the compounding effect. Because then all of a sudden, if you do that every day, you just now grown with it 365% in a year. And so, which is really fascinating because it's like you always have that bell curve, right? And it's that that's why we're having this conversation, is to inspire all of us in specific industries how to be that innovative, early adoptive change to support and create great solutions for those that are expecting great solutions for their pain. Which is, that was my outtake, was like, man, it exists, but no one has actually bundled it together and packaged it together yet for clinicians. And I think that is something that there's huge opportunity potentially for you guys. And also knowing your personal mission and passion as an office that you want to help, bring higher quality healthcare to people. I think this would be the way to give you guys that extra edge that you guys already have, but I think this is the way you can amplify it. I don't know. Closing thoughts, because I was not expecting clinician thoughts. I'd love my head spinning, so I'll shut up talking, but I think it's just a really good thing. We got like another 15 minutes. We started early, so it's a fun conversation on AI and machine learning. Anybody can talk.
With everything creative, there's always a cycle, right? Mm-hmm. So with all, YouTube came out, it was huge, and, it's changed in what it's, providing to, society and what's on it and what people are going there for. Do you guys have any thoughts of, what the next, 1, 5, 10 years,
I wish.
big picture, will happen with AI and how people will be using it? And
I do too, but it's like, this is the
Mars.
crystal ball, right? This is the crystal ball.
What did you say?
Mars.
Mars. I mean, we're talking about, moving from like 2 billion parameter models to 14 billion parameter models, and like,
What does that mean for the common brain?
oh, sorry. So that's basically think of it as a number of connections, right, or neurons. Like,
Okay.
Human brain, we have neurons and different connectors. So the more parameters, the more patterns you're able to, the more layers you're able to train, and the more patterns you're able to recognize.
So it's a speed of information.
I don't
moving
wanna
with
say
more
s-
accuracy.
I don't want. I would like to say quality.
Quality.
More than speed. Yeah.
Okay, the quality of information moving.
Yeah.
Got it.
So, what's it gonna be like in 5 years, 10 years? Man, I don't think anybody can. I think anyone that tries to make a prediction, less than 1% is gonna be correct.
Yeah.
Because what happens is whenever there's a new technology, right? Especially now with ChatGPT, right? You have 100 million people using it, possibly 100 million different ways, and coming up with 100 million different ideas, like every single day. And how can you, when all those ideas are bubbling up, and people are then thinking about, and then you're having conversations about, clinician stuff, and you're gonna go home and then think of something, and then that's gonna be something, and then the thing you thought about was something no one was ever thinking about, So, yeah.
It's a powerful thought. Go ahead, Greg.
Well, a couple thoughts. One, it is that compounding effect,
Yeah.
right? Where technology leads to more technology, right? We never would have had Uber or Lyft without the cell phone, right?
Yep.
If it wasn't in our pocket, then
No one would have ever thought about it.
exactly.
Yeah.
So it's going to have that compounding effect, and thus the rate of change is going to increase even faster. But I think, and I'm not even going to attempt the quote, but I'll use the theme that Jeff Bezos talked about when he's asked that type of a question. He's like, that's the wrong question. The right question really is what's not going to change. Our need as humans is for community with other humans.
Yeah.
And so a place like CRES that builds that community is what's going to last 5 to 10 years from now.
Yeah.
The technology may change. Our use of the technology is going to probably change. But we really need to focus on, if you want to look, if you're thinking about business in particular, what's not going to change so that we can stay focused there. And those other things will be, some will be fads. Some things will make incremental blue ocean opportunities for us. But those things are just going to not be as important as getting the focus right that we are humans interacting with other humans and what that looks like. So I hope that helps.
That's great. I mean, one of the cool things is like an innovator and entrepreneur is like there's so many ways to innovate and create solutions that have never been able to create. Maybe they've always been, the solutions have been there, but it's so much higher quality and the speed and accuracy now of what you
Faster,
can get
better,
to.
cheaper.
Fast, like you said, fast. I'm gonna write that down too. It's just faster, better, cheaper, until it's not. Right? It works until it doesn't work. So everyone else is using it, then it's no longer faster, better, and cheaper. It's just it just becomes relatively normal.
Right.
Right.
And that's really kind of the fun irony of this too, right? Is one of the spaces that's being affected the most right now is those creatives, right? We're taking those jobs away from those creatives because we're now the creators, right? Or at least we think we are.
Yeah, but you're not taking this, man. I can think of
That's
stuff
exactly right.
like there's no taking this, but it's giving me the tool to write. I mean, if I was still
To go
writing
as fast
three,
as you
4, I mean,
want to
I could
go.
write like 17 songs a day now with the tool of this thing if I was still writing like that.
Right.
And I could pull things together, and it's like, again, it's like, where is the human in the middle? That's the question on how we use this tool. I didn't mean to interrupt, but you're right, like the creative thing.
Yeah.
There's a lot more imposters.
It increases the
imposters.
creativity, right?
It allows people to be creative, but if you can get a real natural gifted artistry, they're going to that artist is always going to come through. They're going to find a way to use this differently than the non-artists will. So the non-artist's art will still become some level of, it's a cause and effect. It's human beings will still be resilient, and a new relatively normal will occur.
Yeah.
And then the artists will rise above it, the creators, the innovators, and
It changes the role a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Tony talked earlier about the reviewer. You know, you're kind of the editor of what
Yeah.
you're asking it to produce.
Just look how music's moved already
Yeah.
with technology.
Yeah, yeah.
Before, like, cutting edge music was like stringed instruments, and there was no amplification of electricity or any of that stuff, right? And then that started moving, and the acoustical instruments started playing. But then there was the electric guitar, right, and the electric keyboard, and all these, and it made Steinways and all this stuff. You can like, you can't even like sell pianos anymore. There's beautiful works of art that are just so dated, no one wants them because it's. And then now the invention of iPads and technology and electronic music began to move, and it is fascinating, and then sometimes it's infuriating as well, because then real art honestly gets swallowed up by a big marketing machine, and it just kind of ruins art too, but it's interesting.
So do you know what Andy Warhol's studio is called?
No.
The Factory.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I can't remember the stat, but something like 30% of the value of art is Andy Warhol art, but he created a process, right, to create that art based on pre-existing things.
Mm-hmm.
You can kind of think of that along the same way with AI, right? It's just building on what it knows, and then it's being creative beyond that point and adding on to it. But it's creating those processes and things. So anyway.
No, it's fun.
You know, it was also an interesting take on AI being trained because, we train AI based on information and data that was created by humans. But now humans are using AI to produce data. And then now AI will be trained on that data that was produced by AI.
Yes.
So then you get to a point where the data that AI has is not even human anymore, right? So that's one thing. But, like you said too, like what's not going to change, right? That need for human connection. And when you were talking about music, remember I learned this in humanities back in college where, certain chords just doesn't change, right? We keep using those chords over and
There's
over
only so
and
much to
over.
the theory.
It's even like, there's this video where they played songs from Britney Spears, from Beyonce, Bob Marley, and it was all on the same chord.
4 chords.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or
4
whatever,
chords can
4
play like 7,000 songs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, some things are just not going to change. It's just going to be what it is because, like, it's almost like those things are the core of humanity. Right. And we can only build on it to, like physics, for instance, right? Gravity is never going to change, but we can constantly build things to, or the concept of lift, I should say, was not going to change, right? But we constantly build things so we can go further, go faster, go higher, right? But air is air, still the same. Bernoulli's principle is still Bernoulli's principle.
Some more questions. We got about 5 minutes and we're done. Brian?
Yes, hello. My question is basically, is it possible, and how would you do it, to teach AI or ChatGPT or something like how a CRM works, and then get it to be able to write customizable code for that CRM or for certain platforms to like make it do different things that aren't native to that platform?
Yeah, so, I mean, again, one of the things that...
I'm just going to pause. Just the simplicity. Yeah, of course. Skip. Okay, now let's find out how.
Yeah, how do you do that?
Just kidding.
I mean, so I think that the theme to always keep in mind, and I know it's there, but I think sometimes even for myself, we have to remind ourselves, right? Like ChatGPT or any of these models are trained on things that humans already did, right? And one of the data sets that was used to train GPT is GitHub, where all this code for all types of CRMs and different APIs and different implementations and people just experimenting, doing different things, games, all this stuff. So ChatGPT has all this code, has been trained in all this code. So now when you're looking for, hey, you know what, write me a Rust program that's able to take that has a custom API for a task. These are the properties I want in the API, and I want you to then, write that task now to Asana using their API, so that and then you want to integrate that with Zapier. Like, you shouldn't do that whole thing one time. You do it piece by piece. But you do that, it's gonna try and find in its training data. It's gonna look for things that
Connect, right?
for Asana. It's gonna think for Zapier. It's gonna look at, and then it's gonna do it all in Rust code, right? Because it was trained using the Rust book, so it knows the syntax of how Rust and the rules around that, right? You can even, especially with ChatGPT-4, you can then go further and say things like, okay, now write code that's gonna test all the edge cases, right? Things like, a user may enter a blank name, right? Or they may try and submit a name, but it's SQL because they're trying to like hack. So you wanna scrub that, you wanna clean that to make sure that you don't have someone trying to do a SQL injection attack on you. Rate limiting. I mean, there's so many things you can do, and it's gonna provide all that code for you. And again, now is your job to, okay, let me review it, make sure it's good. You copy paste it, put it in, set it up, and then boom, it's there. I've done this a few times, and it works.
So you still need some level of skill to do it. There's a learned skill behind it, though.
I think the skill set, the most important skill set, is the 10,000-foot view, especially now with things like AI, with being able to do this, is a 10,000-foot view on, I need this, I need Asana, I need Zapier,
critical path, yeah.
I need that. Now you can focus in on those individual components and then just work on them, and then get them in and do it small and in an incremental fashion, to where, like I said, you don't, you tell ChatGPT to, hey, build me Instagram, right? It's not gonna work. You probably need to say, hey, you need to know how Instagram works. The camera on the phone, the image, uploading the image, user accounts, sharing, stuff like that. So you need to have that understanding of the system on a whole, and then you can then build the individual components with the help of something like ChatGPT.
So like exactly what we talked about is strategic flow, right? The value of all these softwares is the intellectual property of knowing how to say, here, I'm at point A, how do I get to point B? And you programming, and well, not programming, but you prompting, here is our theory of the flow that this information will go. Like what we build all the time.
Yeah, and at least for now, it seems like you would need to have like some understanding of the code language so that you can kind of like review it and correct it a little bit.
Now, point of clarification, are you trying to have it write software, or are you just trying to have automation surrounding how to interact with that CRM?
It could be like something as simple as writing code, because in the CRM I'm using right now, it's called High Level, and
Yep.
there's like a little CSS box you can copy and paste code into.
Okay.
So maybe like have it write some code that just changes the the look and structure of it.
Sure. Sure.
Like where the menu buttons are and stuff like that. Or even more complicated.
Yeah,
Use
and you can
cases.
certainly take, if you're taking that CSS block, you can copy and paste that into ChatGPT or some other AI, and ask it, hey, change this to, that I want everything on the left, and whatever the case may be, and it'll come up with some intelligent things there. The other thing I'll mention, just from a potential automation standpoint, is some of the functionality within Microsoft 365. If you turn it on, it can basically evaluate what somebody's doing and actually make recommendations based on it seeing patterns of, hey, it seems like this person is doing this repetitively. So this might be a really good thing to automate, as an example. So
Yeah, and maybe just one more question. We're kind of wrapped right now. Anybody? David, your question? Alex? No? What do you guys think? Was it a good chat? Yes. Yeah? head spinning half the time. What in the world did we just listen to?
Yes, mine too.
Hour and a half went by fast, didn't it?
Yes.
Boys? Way
Simple
too
answer.
fast. Yeah, but
Yes.
well, guys, again, welcome and thank you.
Thank you.
And this was just one of my favorite talks we've done about machine learning AI. I've learned a lot. I got a whole thing full of notes. Again, Greg Dawson from Three Strands, Tony Hill from Juvae. I'm excited about your guys' companies. I'm excited to book my family vacation and retreats and things like that here with CRES through Juvae. And we're really honored to have you as a member and to have you around too as an honorary member. You're here all the time with C12 and Alex. And so this is phenomenal just to have community. And so thanks for just being a part of this community and coming and having a conversation as subject matter experts and allowing people to interact with your knowledge and kind of your genius.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah,
Appreciate
of
the invite.
course.
Thank you.
See ya.